Welcome everybody to the iOCoin podcast. This is your host Joel Bosch, Wisrick. I'm one of the iOCoin developers, and today we're celebrating our 7-year anniversary. That's right, it's been 7 years since we first launched our blockchain, our Genesis block, back in July 24th, 2014. It was a crazy thought back then when everyone was talking about Bitcoin and the mining rigs and how things were just popping along in the blockchain world with Litecoin and video card mining. And it was just an interesting time when a few people in that blockchain space at the time were trying to go against the current model at the time of proof of work and trying to push something that a lot of people back then did not like. And since the Bitcoin model would require users to purchase equipment, it was a sustainable system for a lot of the mining companies at the time, but it was quite expensive to constantly be buying miners to continue to mine Bitcoin. So I thought there has to be a different way. There must be a different way where people that may come from a background like mine, where I come from Puerto Rico, it's not like we have all this money, right? And I thought, well, people from Central America, South America, Africa, how can they get involved in blockchain? How can they get involved in securing blockchain where they don't have to spend so much money on mining rigs? And that's how we basically started thinking of a new way. At the time, there was PeerCoin. PeerCoin had a proof of stake model, but it was not being heavily adopted at the time. A lot of people were knocking anything related to proof of stake, so it took a bunch of people, including the Blackcoin community and other communities that came along, like the Vericoin community, to try to push the system of proof of stake. So we embarked on a journey of launching iOCoin, not only to prove proof of stake, but to also show that the blockchain could carry different things, not only value, but also data as in a file or identities, because obviously Bitcoin had long hex addresses and people were having issues remembering those hex addresses, and it was kind of difficult for newcomers and people that first saw Bitcoin in the beginning. So we wanted to solve those issues. We wanted to solve those potential shortcomings to other people, right, that may not have understood Bitcoin as most of us geeks, right, understood it. So we embarked on the journey of launching iOCoin. It was a proof of work blockchain for the first 2 weeks. We had a very successful mining period, and that's what we chose to distribute the initial iOCoin. But we had it in the system that it would switch over to Proof of Stake 2.0 after the initial mining period. We did it that way because we wanted to do a fair launch. There was no ICO, and this was a complete community-driven project. And that's how we did it. And from there on, we started to do many upgrades to our blockchain, including identities that would be public and private. They definitely have a two-state mechanism. We then, through Dions, added data, encrypted data that could be stored on the blockchain. So it's encrypted and also compressed, and any data that's uploaded into the blockchain is attached to an identity that can be transferred over to another user within the iOCoin blockchain. We also added encrypted messaging, AES-256, and all these things at the time were very challenging things. It took us quite a few years to accomplish them. And even though Ethereum at the time was pushing along with smart contracts, they were still under a proof of work mechanism. So we thought to ourselves, at some point, not only is there going to be one blockchain, but there's going to be a bunch of different blockchains doing different things. And we thought of our project Premine, but there was a lot of stuff to do still with iOCoin, as Premine was going to bring smart contracts to iOCoin. But this brings me to today, after 7 years. We have decided to do a DVM system on top of iOCoin, which would allow our blockchain to carry Ethereum smart contracts, which would allow Ethereum developers to deploy ERC20 tokens and smart contracts on top of iOCoin. And to talk about all the stuff that we're going to be doing with our DVM on iOCoin, we have our lead developer, Derek. How are you, Derek?
Hi, John. I'm fine. Nice to talk to you.
Derek, I want to thank you for being with us today. I mean, every time I get to do this podcast with you, it's an exciting time where we start to reminisce a little bit of the past, but also look to the present and the future of the work that we're going to be doing on iOCoin. And it's just definitely exciting times now that we have decided to go with the DVM system, which will be our smart contract layer on top of our Dions layer. And this is something unique to iOCoin. And if you could explain to our listeners what this is all about and what we're working on currently with the DVM system.
Well, just a few weeks ago, actually, we began working full-time on the virtual machine that we've been needed for running smart contract bytecode generated from, for example, Solidity scripts. We wanted a virtual machine for Dions, and the Dion mechanism that existed already provided the perfect vehicle for that. In that we have a vehicle for storing arbitrary data. First of all, we envisaged having Dions for storing files and encrypted files, and then it turned out to be so flexible that we could use it to implement an encrypted protocol on top of it, allowing for encrypted message passing and also encrypted file passing. As I began to look at how to implement a virtual machine, it was immediately obvious that the starting point would be the payload area that is available via Dions, so that we could build a virtual machine class container that would read bytecode stored in the Dions and be able to run that and compute results in the same way the smart contracts operate on Ethereum. So that the natural way was to develop that on Dions. So what we're doing now is we are at the testnet phase for testing the virtual machine that we have, which we call DVM. Part of the testing involved developing our own clone of the Solidity IDE. So we have cloned also Remix. We call it DMix, and this is our own copy of Remix, and we're using this to develop the Solidity IDE. Will be used together with Dions. Obviously, the mechanism under the hood is different from that used on ETH, so we cannot use ours with ETH, although later we could publish a plugin to use with the Remix IDE, because it's a plugin-based software system where we could write a plugin to interconnect with Dion. So there's a lot of flexibility, but right now it's more expeditious to use our own clone of Remix using the IDE and with the virtual machine on Dion's.
So as we know, Derek, some of the projects that are out there, for example, we have ADA. They are moving fast over to the security mechanism of proof of stake. We have ETH 2.0, basically the Ethereum developers moving over to the proof of stake. And what's important that our audience hears from us is that we completed that in 2014, and we've been testing our proof of stake for all those years in a very secure way. It's been 100% uptime in all of those years. Some of the complaints that we always hear around Ethereum, gas fees being too high or transactions backing up. What could you say about the approach of the DVM system, where we could in any way aid into those Achilles heels that they're trying to fix as they move, like Ethereum, as they're moving over to Ethereum 2.0?
Yeah. Well, ETH is a very unstable software system in general. It is constantly backing up on transactions, and the exchanges are spending a lot of time focusing on that and having to focus on Ethereum at the expense of other projects which are not so valuable to them, and they have to take second place. Although these projects which are not right now so valuable are not backing up anything like as often, and arguably are better quality projects. So the Ethereum is a very unstable software system, with or without the virtual machine architecture, which runs the smart contracts. So, I could just say it's better because we're doing it our way. But more in particular, we are building a very specific piece of functionality into an already very very tested and hardened system that's been under constant tests since I've been here, at least since 2015, and it's been very stable throughout the deployment of Dion's, so that we have a nicely tested and robust platform framework, and we are now implementing the DVM in a very specific manner, so that it has no side effects to the wider system, whereas the Ethereum is it's a very unstable software in general. So that's our advantage, that we are adding a very precise piece of functionality here. We're not just going to mess that up by making spaghetti code. I don't want to cast aspersions upon Ethereum, but we have a very tried and tested model. We are adding a very specific piece of functionality here.
I think also, which is important, is the fact of the compatibility that we will be opening up for any of this ERC20 smart contracts. If you could talk a little bit about that. And, now they got the swaps.
That's right.
You have some of the Uniswaps of the world and the pancake swaps. And a lot of people may not know that we're building our own swap-like systems.
Yep. Well, going back a bit, when we first put on smart contracts on the table, we didn't commit to supporting Ethereum stuff, Ethereum interfaces such as ERC20. Our initial thoughts on smart contracts were our own take, but since we began in earnest working on this, we decided to go for full compatibility with Ethereum. Now, the smart contracts written for the Ethereum platform are primarily written in Solidity, a scripting language which implements various interfaces which require the script to implement certain functions the way that the functions are implemented are up to the developer, but it must implement certain functions, and this is known as an interface. And we decided that we would not only implement the same interfaces, but implement the ecosystem of beginning with Solidity and then generating bytecode. Now, if you look at the flow of developing a contract in Solidity all the way through to bytecode, so far these are the same in Ethereum. What we're going to do is provide the mechanism under the hood that will carry out the computations on the bytecode, so that to the user the interface will be the same. And this means that smart contract code that runs on Ethereum, swaps code, ERC20 tokens, contracts that carry out other types of functionality which are not so common, this will work on DAOs also, so that we achieve the full compatibility. And that's what we decided, so that we can model our own gas prices in our system, so that perhaps given our probability of stability and also the low gas prices, people who are currently developing for Ethereum will have an alternative to perhaps come over to us and develop their smart contracts on Dions, which will be very nice.
Absolutely, and with that, people will then, find out of all of the different things that we have, like all the messaging capabilities that are on IOC, which a lot of people don't understand could expand to communications with all kinds of IoT devices, which could interact with the smart contracts. And this is something that's running native on our blockchains. Some of these things are not running native either on Ethereum or ADA or even certain other chains that are out there. So what we're really trying to do is just improving the overall Ethereum ecosystem. There could be developers that may want to choose to deploy on our chain and then maybe clone it over to Ethereum or vice versa.
Indeed, people could develop scripts on our system, and if they want, they could port it straight over to ETH, because the underlying code would be the same. It's just a Solidity script, and the compiler used just a Solidity compiler, so they would be able to port back to ETH if they wished.
Everybody's talking about the NFTs, and obviously it's just a huge market now. As you know, my daughter is a designer, and she's been doing a lot of artwork since she was very early in her years, and now she's obviously in college, looking forward to doing some of her artwork as an NFT. And and this is some of the things that IOC, once we deploy the DVM and we bring in all the plugins, this is something that we're going to be able to also launch within the IOC sphere, right? And and myself, I've been a music producer for many, many years, and the people that I know that surround me for many years are musical producers. So there are many ideas that I've been working around also to bring over to our NFT world in terms of like beat making capabilities and other musical aspects, where we could basically take some of those sounds and NFT them, and that would go along with copyrights. Some of those copyrights could be stored on the blockchain itself, without having to use the IPFS system. All these NFTs, with a musical aspect, they could have not only the NFT but also carrying the copyright itself within our system. So somebody can make a Dions, the beat or the song name, store the copyright, then NFT it, and then when they're done, they can transfer it. Using the smart contract mechanisms, launching those transactions from A to B, and all being encompassed in its own blockchain ecosystem without having to use third-party capabilities, as long as some of those files are within the scope of 1 megabyte. For people to know, The reason we have many of our blockchains now stuck at either 1 megabyte, which Ethereum is there, they're thinking about increasing the block size with increased capabilities of internet speeds. Um, these are going to be things that for us, because sometimes people think about the 4 megabyte, threshold. With the internet speed, those should be fairly acceptable limits. Coming up now in the 2022s and 2023, where we even have Starlink and many of these satellite internet providers and high speed data. So
Yeah.
we foresee those caps that we put as Satoshi did when we started, because back in when he had the 1 megabyte. So we don't see a problem, with that. But some other people may think about, well, what are you going to do in terms of the bloat on the blockchain? And this is something that we had spoke in the past on how we would do a mechanism of kind of like a peer-to-peer data storage mechanism aside, within the blockchain itself. So some of these ideas, I know that along with this one that I just spoke about and the Nighthawk idea, which we'll get into, can also be launched down the line as sister chains
Yeah.
or sister services to the iOCoin blockchain. So with that, what is your view, Derek, after we're done with the DVM? And as I speak about decentralized data storage and I speak about privacy, right? As we have already coded most of the Nighthawk, but we didn't launch it, as our community knows, which is, the ring signatures. What do you see in the future where we could either launch this sister chains to iOCoin to improve either privacy or decentralized storage for the entire ecosystem of iOCoin?
Well, we went a long way along the road of developing Nighthawk and to develop an anonymous chain from ground up, and then to try and integrate this with the Dion system. I think, as you probably recall, we got somewhat we had some reservations as to whether to proceed with that because of what we'd seen in the in terms of other crypto coins and what we'd seen happen. So although we did a lot of work, it was we had some reservations, and basically that's not wasted work. It's sitting there waiting to be resumed. I would say that the best thing after we've proceeded on from the DVM implementation would be to start working in earnest on developing an on-chain from ground up, so that Nighthawk would essentially be a completely new chain. Because when it comes to anonymity, there is basically no choice. You cannot achieve full anonymity by locking into an existing chain that was built on being a public service chain. You need to start from the ground up.
Correct, and we had discussed that, and with our community, it's the importance of having full anonymity and not just a patch, whereas some of the other projects tend to do. Yeah. So I think that for a small recap, what we have been talking about is our new core DVM. It's a virtual environment on top of the Dions, which will enable ERC20 and smart contracts on top of IOC, fully compatible with Ethereum.
Yeah.
And we're now diving into some of the ideas that we started working on, but we did not finish, which were Nighthawk, which was ring signatures that were going to be enabled on chain. And as we went on, we put those on hold, as we believe it would be best to be enabled on a chain from the Genesis block. And this could be a sister chain that will aid into privacy of the IOCoin environment as we have a privacy sidechain to IOCoin.
The way other anonymous chains had proceeded in the past. A lot of them had built on erroneous security models in their anonymity, and errors in the way they'd implemented SSL functions, for example. They had then carried out patches and had found themselves trying to explain why their anonymity was diluted, how their anonymity did not mean anonymity; it meant a partial degree of security, and so on. These are all problems that occur when people have ill thought out procedures for developing their systems, and our advantage would be that we are going to develop this from scratch, and well, we've done a lot of work already, but we're going to complete that, and it will be based on the proposition of being secure from the genesis onward. So that was just one thought on what's different from what we'll be doing from what a lot of these other projects have done.
And that's a very important point, so that our community could understand, the reasoning behind our stopping of the Nighthawk development. It's just a matter of how we're going to implement it for the future. And as we both believe in privacy, this will come to the IOCoin ecosystem as we move along.
Yeah.
And I think lastly, for our audience, our Chameleon project, it's also on the wings.
Yeah.
So this entire ecosystem, it's going to come together as we now approach this new era of smart contract swapping, NFTs, and on and off ramps. And as we dive a little bit into the recent conversations between Elon and Elon Musk and Jack, from Twitter, some of those conversations and concerns from Elon have been around, how green is Bitcoin and the whys of transaction speed are around, proof of work at times, and he has, asked of the Dogecoin community to kind of have and bring some improvements on the table. And to me, it's quite amazing that for some odd reason, there is no mention of, some of the projects like IOCoin, obviously, because we're not at the forefront. So he might not know all the, advances that we have already done in terms of taking care of many of the concerns that he's brought onto the table.
Yep.
And this is some of the similar concerns that we originally had around 2014. And we have taken care of many of those things, surrounding computations, and energy efficient, crypto, mining, as we call staking. But now, we have some projects that use the word staking, but they're actually just using smart contracts to give incentives for people, but they're not necessarily securing the chain itself. And around this, I get to Chameleon, as we have talked about the entropy-based graph ledger and or quantum net. And if you could dive a little bit into, the Chameleon aspect of things and how it's different from the proof of stake system that we have been using for all this time, that we were one of the pioneers in it, and how we're looking into the future as to building systems and blockchain systems, or in this case, it wouldn't be a blockchain per se. We're talking about a graph ledger. So if you could dive a little bit into explaining how we upgrade and or necessarily move away now from proof of stake to a new security mechanism into the quantum entropy-based
Yeah.
ledger, and what your ideas are around that.
Well, Premine will be, in my view, the final stage before opening up a completely different type of ecosystem. The existing blockchain model, which is largely cut and paste across many vast majority of cryptocurrency projects, whether they're based on proof of work or proof of stake, the model is largely carried over and copied. It involves a single continuous ledger, and for example, in Bitcoin, the amount of data is gradually becoming prohibitive for many users. It's taking up enormous proportions of their disk drive, and a lot of people don't have the money to spend on extra disk space. They have older laptops, for example, and they don't have the resources to maintain this. The existing blockchain model is becoming untenable as we move into the future, as the blockchain increases in size. One solution to this is to break up the blockchain itself and distribute it in fragments. An analogy is the way in which files are split up over the internet for storage. They are not stored in any one place as a whole file, but rather chunks of them are distributed over the network, so that you have in any one place, not the entire file, and you have multiple copies on the network, and so that you have a reduction in storage on average, and you have increased failover in that more systems have copies of the necessary chunks, and when it's time to get the file off the system, it is reconstituted by reassembling the fragments from certain host machines. So the blockchain would then essentially be transformed into a data structure which is fragmented over the internet. This means that no single host would hold the entire ledger, in inverted commas, so to speak, just to draw an analogy with blockchain. They would not hold the entire ledger, they would hold part of the ledger, and various machines, various hosts would hold certain overlapping chunks of the ledger. So you have a random distribution, which gives a relief to individual user systems, not being so resource intensive, and also providing the failover. Also, the proof of work that we see in Bitcoin and in many other copy-paste coins, the amount of energy that's expended in pumping these ASIC farms to mine Bitcoin is enormous. The great advantage of POS currencies like ours was that we are staking, the staking algorithm that we use is very much akin to CPU scavenging, so that the system will tend to give way to threads that are carrying out mining of IOC, and also obviously for the other POS systems. They are very much scavenging, so they will tend to give way to threads on the system and so not block the resources. So they're resource friendly. That's one advantage. Moving forward, if we implement a distributed ledger, we can carry out logical validations based on the number of hosts. So to put it in a simple analogy, we have many hosts carrying out validations, logical validations, which are akin to mathematical proofs of the validity of data updates in the system. And it is difficult to try to copy or simulate a large a large entropic system by a small group of attackers or individuals who are trying to simulate it. So the entropy of a system itself is the chaos. The entropy of a system is a physical property of it, which the other systems are not using, and they're using work, CPU, the GPU ASICs thrashing to try and mine the blocks. On POS, we're using a much more user-friendly system, but it's based on CPU scavenging. The alternative is to use, instead of what is essentially proof of work in a more friendly manner, to use another physical property entirely, which is the entropy of a system. If there's a system that's large enough and it has enough entropy, then that will be a security factor, and the individual, to draw an analogy, the transaction will not require any kind of work. It will not require any kind of work in the sense of Bitcoin or even a POS currency. It will require a validation. So it will be a massive Ethereum proving system distributed, so that there will be no work done in the same way. That the security factor would be the entropy. So that if the system is large enough, then potentially one could envisage a very high throughput of transactions, to put it simply. Again, I'm drawing an analogy, but one could imagine a very high throughput of currency transactions in that system due to the entropy.
Which it goes to the heart of what Elon, some of Elon's concerns are, for Bitcoin in terms of the transaction times and throughput of Bitcoin. So definitely coming up here in the near future, some of those things are not only being envisioned, but they're also, in the stage of more than ideas and just straight up white papers, where a lot of people are, where they just write endless white papers, but then there is not enough implementation to move, some of these things forward. Obviously, some of these other projects, either do ICOs around these white papers, and then when it goes to implementation, that's where the failure comes. And when you're speaking about our team, we spend more time, diving into the actual work and less time speaking and writing beautiful paper that may sound nice, but when it comes time to implement, it's a completely different beast at that point. So we're driving forward with work, and which is extremely important. But now in this podcast, we're also going over what our thoughts are moving forward into improving the entire whole ecosystem of blockchains and distributed ledgers. So I think it's really nice that we have taken the time to once again talk about the subjects from the inception of iOCoin and its beginning to now the Dions and how we're implementing bytecode on top of Dions, and then moving over to creating the DVM smart contract system, which will in its place be compatible with the ERC20 and the smart contract systems, so that some of those developers or all the developers that may want to launch those contracts, they could do them in iOCoin. Also recognizing the situation around privacy and how we have systems right now where anybody could just see how much you are sending and probably who is sending. And as we move forward, if banks decide to have their own ledgers, they're not going to want to have their customers' data publicly available. So it's a subject and that we can discard, that we are at the ready to deploy at some point, and it's important that people have some kind of privacy, as you have circumstances where there may be data that people may want to keep compliant to a certain degree of privacy, either of medical records or any other things, and some of those transactions should not be out in the public, where anybody could possibly see those transactions happening. It could be hospital between hospitals, and or other things into banking and financing. And this is why we continue to speak about Nighthawk as an important step in the iOCoin ecosystem. And added to that, we're also talking about Chameleon as an entropy-based graph ledger, which will be an upgrade to the current status of proof of work, proof of stake, and now we're talking entropy based graph and other systems that would upgrade our current systems that people are using. So I think that with that, we have a pretty good plan moving forward. So with that said, I just want to thank Derek for being with us today. I mean, this is going to be a bunch of exciting months coming up here with the DVM. And as we deploy that and we start seeing some of these projects happening on iOCoin, which may not be from the iOCoin development team itself, but it will be exciting to see all the things that are going to be happening around our ecosystem in iOCoin. So once again, I want to thank everybody for listening to our second iOCoin development podcast. And please check us out at www.iocoin.io. Thank you again for listening. Have a great day. Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Joe.